Hey people, it's Sunday morning before Memorial Day down in South Mississippi, and we've been getting rain here past 3 days. Everything's growing real good. This cabbage is definitely due, and there's some sweet corn, and it's fattening on up like in this rain. Potatoes are getting tall, and I've been pruning some squash out of here, and I thought of putting some sweet potatoes in here so it'd be easier to dig them. I just roll them tires over. I've been pulling some cucumbers off of here. And here's a fat one I'll get out of here. Like the birds sit up here and poop. And all these cabbage are doing better. I had two of them that were looking like this. And I noticed one of them, it was because it had a catch pan at the bottom of the pot, so I took it out and put it in the garden. But I'm going to have these sweet potatoes growing all up on top of here. And my red castors are looking really beautiful. I don't know the name of them. Like I say, an old friend gave me that seed about 20 years ago, but you can see the difference between the red one and these green ones. I bought seeds last year. And I'm going to have to tie these tomatoes up after all that rain we had the past couple of days. I'm supposed to have it several more. These are lemon trees that I started from seed 9 months ago or less. And this fig, it was in a box inside my motorcycle when I went and picked it up just less than 2 months ago. It's growing real quick. So I'm going to start this video out with some really offensive jokes. I'll probably lose some subs over this, but you know what the pagan word for God is? God. What do you call somebody who sends their children off to summer camp every year to get molested? Christian. And so what do you call the kid that gets molested every year and doesn't ever tell nobody? A kidiot. A kidiot. And that would be the Greek word for it. So this is something I was reading about in the Torah in Deuteronomy 13, the second law. And I was kind of proud to see that these priests were having heterosexual sex too, because you know most of it's all about homosexual sex. But it's still in the hide-all. You know, the first time the idol comes up is in the story of Jacob when he steals the idols from Laban and has Rebecca hide them in her seat. The hide-all is your butthole. If you don't want the police to get it, you stick it in the hide-all. And it was down here in 13:13. It says, are gone out the men and the children Belial. And that's not Belial, that's Belial. This I-O reads as an E, Belial. And so I was studying this and comparing it to the Greek, where I noticed that they took out the children here. But they used other words. And that's where this kidiot comes from. You did not know. Your child didn't tell you of a kid, a K-E-D-E-I-T-E, a kidiot. And after reading in the Hebrew and the Greek, I thought this would be a good one to learn some Latin. You know, I say the Latin is difficult, so I put the Latin up here. But you know, as I was saying, your God in Hebrew, you know, is Allah, A-L-E. Yours is this K at the end, which actually reads as a D. And in the Greek, it was theos, theity. And in the Latin, it was deus. And they only add the word God when they want to absorb the pagans up in Britain into the religion. Then they change it to God. And you see here in the Latin where it says egressunt fili Belial, or Belial here. You know, egressi, that's the word in when it says and he drove them out of the garden, Igresh. But this word over here in the Greek for the lawbreakers, it's not lawbreakers, it's paranoma, Deuteronomy, the law. Well, para is a parachute. It's a cover over, para over the law, not lawbreakers. These are people above the law. These were the priests, the governors, the kings, the paranoma, above the law. This is a story about those type of men. And it's helped on the men above the law. And these would better be known as the paran. The paran, it's summoned to call them in, and pairing them up, and pairing them it's summoned. And a fest is on pant as to us. The cat account as. The cat. So I was proud that they was having some heterosexual sex in the Bible too. The cat and the OI reads a U, account as. That's a young man trying to get as much ass as he can, A cat account as. And then fall in. You fell to the cat accounter. Then fall a notion, N-A-U-T. And read that letter, Sometimes it's E and sometimes it's a I-O. And fall a notion, legend is. For youth, E-U-T-H. The youth of men. The children. And so that's why it doesn't say children here. They put the children here. We should go. And for youth in. And will a trusum in. And it's L, followed by the A. Read it as an N, It's not will, but when. Either way you want to read it, when. It will happen, and when it happens, when a trusum in. A truse. You're being intrusive. And so this God's other. This is the U's. The OI reading is a U-S-E. The used, T-E-R. The user was. OI reading is a vav, a U. The user was. The other gods. The user was. And then the OI reading is a U. Us. The user was us. A idiot. Somebody who didn't know to tell. You did not know. And over here it was ignoratus. This QU, most of the time you just replace it with a WH. It's where your word question comes from. Questions start with a WH. What, where, when, and how, and whose, ignoratus. Did not know. So I think we'll try to read this Hebrew and then the Greek before the Latin. So my mama grew up in Lewiston, and all her family was Catholic, and they all had big dairy farms in Vermont and in Quebec. And every summer they would go over there to help on the farm. She said they got molested every summer, but they were idiots. They were Catholics. Catholics are taught not to talk about sex. But she understood it was a cycle, and you had to break the cycle to stop it. So she didn't really want to move down to Mississippi, but she didn't put up much of an argument. But we still made the trip and visit cousins for a couple weeks every summer. But she waited till we was all grown, all my brothers and sisters were grown, before she told us the story, because she still had that Catholic instilled in her. You're not supposed to talk about it. So the greatest thing that I learned from reading the Hebrew and the Greek and the Latin is who's doing the interpretation, what they're trying to hide. Even though I don't get every word, there's some words that just stand out that everybody knows what they mean. And I can tell by the interpretation that they forced on it as who's trying to hide what. And so this is why I don't care much for Christians and the unmentionables. If you look into who's the largest sex trafficking industry of all time, it's the same people that you're expecting to translate this Greek, Latin, and Hebrew Bible to your King James Kids version. Kidiots. So I've been looking harder at some of these final letters. I figured out the M looked more like an S a long time ago. And this final K, it kind of looks more like the D. You see how it's shifted over like the D now. And the final N, not so much, but you see how the neck shifts, and it's possibly the Z. But I studied the letter chart, and you see this M here, and it's given a number 40. And this S here, number 60. And if you look at this final M, it's a 600, and it looks more like the S. And this final N being as a 700. There's a reason there's those 5 final letters. It makes me think it's probably the Z. And this final K, the way it reaches over now, it used to look like this, the K, but now it looks much more like this D here. And so I've been looking at it to see which direction that it might read as a D and then a K. And I can see that I'm going to have to study in to this final X and this final P. And so the final P, the P is the 80. So that's not going to give me a clue unless it would be reading as a chit. The H would be the 8. And the Zodi is the 900, which is the 90. So that's not going to be much of a clue unless it's the Tet. But I haven't studied them a lot yet. But the K is definitely a D when you're reading it forward, and a K backward. So I'm going to read this with the tack. So the words after this tack I'm going to read backwards and forwards. And I'm going to read the words with the A head on. And this final K, I'm going to read it as a D when it's a final. And only when reading that word backwards, it'll be a K first and a D after. So let me go over all these letter changes first, and I'm going to read all this quick. But when the K's final, it's a D. When the N's final, it's a Z. When the I is followed by the O, it's a E. And when the O is followed by the I, it's a U. So it changes this word. It reads both ways, a lull and a lil. The Vav followed by the Aleph reads as a T or a D, and that's where they're getting this word are gone out. It comes from exit. The IE here reads as an A, and this is of V. The Lord is of the. There's a whole bunch of lords. It's always talking about the Lord of the what. And so when you see a double I, the first one reads as an H, and it's the HAVE, the have. And there's several other ways that you can turn this into have. You can just have a H in front of it. And see if there's any more letter changes in here. The L followed by the A, that's where they get this no from. That's an N, no. And so this reads as a seems, a CEMS. And seems it's from of act to write. A RID, a RIT, and a write and to read. You're writing about it because you want to get rid of it. Seems it's from of act to write, as reveal, RAVEAL. As reveal, they dents, DNTZ, dents. Dent is a scar. It's comes from dent, a blow to deal in fighting, especially with a sword, to reveal their scars. Seems it's from of act to rid, as reveal they dents, littles in tism no more. It's a dansum, the vowel followed by the A, reading as a T or a D. And it's a dansum, or gone out the men, gone to the dance. It's a dansum, been a lull, a period of no wind. You're on the ship sailing, the wind stopped. And it's a dansum, been a lull, belil, to make small, from forbid, which dict at. Which dict, D-I-C-H, and the vav followed by the A is a T or a D. Which dict at. The one that's getting screwed, either way it goes. If you're the king, you dictate. And which dict at. And dict at of C's, backwards and forward, S-I-S. Of C's, B. The I followed by the O here, beware. Of their city is where. The I followed by the O becoming a U here. Where from, of their city. Where from, where they're from. Why dict out of seas? Beware from no more. In like when of deal. When of a deal they mature 'em. They're getting this other from this etros over here, which is not actually heteros. But usually they say this is behind, a hurry. He's behind, he's in a hurry to catch up, or after, or something like that. But the deal, they mature 'em. They're going to grow up. And the deal, they mature 'em, a sure nose to did Adam. When they grow up, you're going to know who your daddy is. The one with the big old nose, your daddy was a Jew. A sure nose to did Adam. The M, final M, reads the S. T-O-D-I-D-O-T, at Adam. And nose to did Adam. Addressed which fort. Addressed to sent to, addressed, and which fort, when you have an argument, which fort, are you with the blue or the red? There's two sides of every argument. And addressed to which fort? Assault, to attack. And this is the word I was looking at when I run into this. And they say it's an ancient word for money. Salt was used for money. And I'll get into that in another movie to get along. And addressed which fort? Assault. Hidden, H-I-D-E-N. Hidden wine. Hidden wine. That old juice that Michael Jackson used to dish out to the kids. Hidden the wine. And so this is a wine, isn't a W-H-I-N-E. The N followed by the E becomes a bet, which reads as a B, a V, or an I-N. W-H-I-N-E, the wine. And assault, hidden, wine, omit. The truth coming out in the cry. Hitting, give a beating. And assault, hitting, the wine, omit. That tells off in the cry. And it has much more meanings here when you go back and read it with the A words the other direction. And hidden wine omitting cause, be C-U-Z. And omitting cause it bear, got your daddy's nose. Cause it bear knows it, Gnostic, knowledge. And knows it they two of, double E, E-Y, T-H-E-Y, they two of, your children. You can tell by that big old nose, that knows it. That's why when you see the old comics of Jews, old newspaper, I don't know if they still do it, but they used to put them a nose bigger than anything on their body. Their nose was bigger than their head. That's where you could tell it was a Jew. And that's what it says on the day 6 when he first created man. He made him a nose, and made him in likeness, the nose. And knows it they two of his, H-I-Z, his at in forbid. Let me try this one more time. Seems it's from of act to rid, as reveal they dents, littles bitsum no more. It's a dancem ben, a lull in lil from forbid, why dictat of seas, beware from, no more in like, when of deal they maturum, a sure nose to did Adam, address which fort assault hidden, wine omitten, 'cause it bear, knows it they to of his at in forbid. Oh God, in forbid that could be my child. So let me cut this off here, and I'll read this Greek and Latin in the next movie I'll be have up here shortly. Good day.